Good morning, class. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about gender orientation. So this is, well, gender socialization. So we do talk about gender orientation too, but that's a little bit later in the lecture. What I'm going to do is this is chapter 13, and it's not super long, but I think I'm going to break it down into two parts, and I'm going to try to go about 20 minutes. I think each section will go about 20 minutes. So we're going to call this 13A, and it is gender socialization. That's what we're going to be dealing with. Okay, the basic question, and I kind of introduced this last time, is we know that girls and boys behave differently. I mean, I can look at the second grade class of my granddaughter, and I watch the boys and I watch the girls, and clearly there are differences in behavior, clearly. And you look at people your age, and you see differences in gender behavior. And the question is why is that? Is it just due to biology? Okay, the notion that biology is destiny, that little boys are little boys, and little girls are little girls. Or is it that little boys learn to be little boys and little girls learn to be little girls? So little boys tend to be more aggressive. And if you doubt that, you need to just open your eyes and look around. And you'll find that even at a very young age, little boys are more aggressive generally. Now, I'm telling you, there's some aggressive girls and there's some passive boys. But generally speaking, we find that boys are more aggressive. So the question is that due to some biological difference, maybe some imprinting, or is it due to the fact that little boys are allowed to be more aggressive? They're encouraged to be more aggressive. They're given more aggressive toys, and when they misbehave, they're excused with the statement that, well, boys will be boys, okay? And a little girl misbehaves. Oh, little girls don't do that. Little girls don't act like that. So that's the question. Is it biological or is it environmental? Is it nature or is it nurture? And so that's kind of what we're going to address. Now, there's an interesting history on this, and I kind of want to go through it because it's very illustrative of how we think of science as being this objective thing. And a lot of times it's really not. There's a lot of subjectivity that goes into science. And so I want to kind of trace this historically. In the 1940s, okay, when I was a little boy, and then in the early 50s, I got to tell you that women, this is hard to say, but women were thought to be inferior. That they were the fairer sex. Nobody doubted that. But they didn't do well. They weren't as good at school. They weren't as smart. That's because all the guys went to college and the girls didn't. And, guys were stronger and faster and threw a ball further, and girls couldn't throw a ball. They couldn't run. We really believed. I mean, I heard teachers say this back in the sixth grade, is that little girls can't run long distances because it harms their sexual reproductive organs. So, I guess sexual and reproductive, that's redundant, and it harms their reproductive organs. So that was the idea, okay, in the 40s and 50s. Well, along comes the 60s, and society starts to change in pretty radical fashion. And there was a civil rights movement that got started in 1954 with the Brown versus Peak Board of Education decision, and then continued through with the Montgomery bus boycott and then into the 60s. But there was also the women's movement and the anti-war movement. Well, we're interested in the women's movement. And what was going on in the women's movement is that some women who worked outside the home were fed up with the idea that they got paid less than guys for doing the same job. Hey, I can understand it. It wasn't fair. When I was teaching at a college in Arkansas back in the 1970s, early 70s, there was a teacher there who was a math professor, She had her PhD. I had my PhD. We've both been in the same amount of time. She made, I think I made $18,000 a year, and she made like $16,000 a year. So she made $2,000 less. Okay. Now on a percentage basis, that's quite a bit. Okay. And so the school justification was that, well, she's a woman. And in following that, she doesn't have a family to feed, and a man does. Well, the ironic thing is that at that very time, I had no kids, and I had a wife who worked. She was a single mom who had two daughters in college. So, you know, the logic of that didn't hold up, and it wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. Okay, I didn't give up my extra money to her, I admit, but I mean, that's the way the system was. So the women's movement got started in the 50s and 60s, and the rallying cry was equal pay for equal work. But the counter argument is that, wait a second, you're inferior to men. You don't deserve the same amount of money as men do, okay, because you're biologically inferior. Well, the way the feminists dealt with that is that they came up with this new argument, okay, and the basic idea, whereas in the 1940s, the idea was biology is destiny. I'll type that in here just because I'm ready to type a little this morning. Biology is destiny. Oops, if I could spell it. And that just means that gender roles are biologically determined. But they came up, but they counteracted this, and they came up with this new idea, okay? And it's called psychosexual neutrality. Psychosexual neutrality, and here's the theory. There are biological differences between men and women. They conceded that, and these are the differences. Men impregnate, women ovulate, gestate, and lactate. And all other differences are learned. The fact that little boys are more aggressive is because they learn to be more aggressive. The fact that little girls are better readers is because their teachers are female and they identify with them and they want to please them, and so they're better readers, okay? So it's learned. The differences, all the differences are learned, basically, except these biological things. And that idea took hold. And so what you go from is a theory of biological determinism, where biology determines everything, to cultural determinism, where the culture and what you learn, okay, determines everything. So we switched. Okay, well, at this time, in the 1970s, an event occurred that reinforced the psychosexual neutrality, and I'm going to tell you about it. There were these two twin boys, okay, in Manitoba, Canada. They were born, and for some reason, they weren't circumcised initially, and then later on they decided to circumcise them. I think they had some medical issue, and at any rate, one of the boys, they used a cauterizing machine to get rid of the foreskin, and one of the boys, they had the power up too high or something, and it literally fried his penis, and it fell off. I mean, and so the parents, you know, are understandably really upset. And the doctors are not knowing what to do. And so there was this guy, okay, named John Money, at Johns Hopkins University. And he said he was an advocate of this psychosexual neutrality. And his argument was, well, raise him as a girl, okay? And so the parents bought into it. And so what they did is they changed the plumbing, okay? They fashioned kind of, he was castrated, they fashioned a vagina out of the material that was down there. They said, okay, when he becomes an adolescent, we'll give him hormones and everything will be hunky-dory in terms of this theory of psychosexual neutrality. And all the while in the 70s and 80s, there was research that focused on how successful the adjustment was. This guy Money kept talking about how great it was, okay? In reality, it was terrible. The kid did not adjust. He had all kinds of problems, okay? Let me just give you a few examples. They would, his parents would give him, he'd go into a store to buy an umbrella and he'd come out with a bazooka, They dressed him in frilly dresses and he'd tear them off. he liked to fight and wrestle, okay? Everybody thought he was a little girl, but he could beat up, you know, a lot of the little boys. And they recognized that his behavior was strange. I mean, the kids knew something was wrong, okay? But this psychologist, he kept saying, oh, this is okay, this is normal, you know? One of the things I thought that was so interesting is that this little kid, insisted on peeing, urinating, standing up. Isn't that weird? So guys go, standing up, girls sit. And this little guy would stand up, and it made a mess. And, you know, the girls finally wouldn't let him in the bathroom because he was making such a mess. Well, this goes on, and they keep reassuring him, oh, you're a little girl, you know, you'll get used to it. But he never adjusted to that. Well, all the while, we're thinking that the adjustment was successful, okay? Folks, I'm telling you, you've got to think critically. Anytime you read something, you've got to think, does this person have a vested interest? And almost always they do, or they wouldn't be writing about it, okay? So you've got to question what everybody says. Think critically. You question what I say, what all of your teachers say, what you read in magazines. We think of science as being this, and by science, I mean the hard sciences. We think of them as being objective and all this kind of stuff, but I'm telling you, a lot of times their biases enter in. And I could cite some stuff, but I ain't going to get into that right now. Okay? So at any rate, money says it's good, and later on, it wasn't until the 1990s that it came out that was all a lie, and that the guy, you know, he was on the point of suicide, and he had this confrontation with his folks. The folks confessed everything, and you know, he said it was like a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Later on, he married, he adopted some kids. They restructured his plumbing, and you know, but the thing is, he committed suicide when he was 38 years old. I mean, it was just too much for him. So at any rate, that was this. So people looked at this case study as support for this psychosexual neutrality business. So it came into being to justify the fact that, well, okay, you're saying that women don't deserve the same pay as men. But in reality, the differences between men and women are just learned, okay? They're not that important. And so they did that to undercut, you know, that viewpoint, that sexist viewpoint. Well, what's happened more recently is that this feminist argument has been undercut. It was undercut by the revelation that money was lying through his teeth about this, and that the story about this little boy was a falsehood, and just other research that was done suggesting that little boys and little girls are really different, okay, and they're different in a lot of ways. Little girls are better at multitasking. They can integrate their two hemispheres better than boys, and the reason is biological, because the corpus callosum that connects the two hemispheres of their brain is bigger before they're even born in little girls than it is in little boys. It can't be learned. It's before birth. And so we know that girls do sometimes. Girls are better readers, okay? Boys are far more likely to have to go through remedial reading classes. Girls sing on tune better than boys do. Boys are better at math. Ninth grade achievement tests, always the top scores in mathematics are always guys, little guys. So guys have some strengths, girls have some strengths, all right? And they tend to be, you know, they tend to be biological. So we see these differences. So as time goes on, I think the pendulum is swinging back away from cultural determinism and more to a biological basis. Now, obviously, the culture reinforces the biology, right? I mean, little boys are encouraged to be aggressive, but they're naturally that way, okay? So what you get is the two things overlap and reinforce each other. Little girls are less aggressive, and they're encouraged to be less aggressive. So it, generally it works out. Now, some little girls are labeled tomboys because they're more aggressive and they don't fit the mold. And that happens. I mean, we're all individuals and we all differ, but we do find some commonalities within the genders. Okay. All right. Let me just check my notes. I think okay. Oh yeah. Something else I needed to mention is that if you look at the hormones of boys and girls, they're the same. We have the same hormones. We got testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, but the amounts differ between the genders. So guys have a preponderance of testosterone. Well, testosterone makes you more aggressive, whether you're a girl or a guy. If you've got more testosterone, you're going to be more aggressive. Well, guys have it more, so they're more aggressive, okay? Little girls have more estrogen, so they're more likely to cry, okay? I don't know if I was telling you guys this or the other class, but as women age, once they go through menopause, they lose their estrogen, okay? And the testosterone that they have becomes more dominant, so they become more aggressive. And so the concept of a mean old woman, it makes sense because they got more testosterone. Guys lose their testosterone. We lose 1 to 2% a year after the age of 18. So 18 is the peak production of testosterone. After that, it's downhill. So what happens to old guys like me? We lose our testosterone and estrogen becomes more predominant. So we cry more, okay? I mean, I'm weeping all the time. It's embarrassing. But it's a function of the chemicals in our body. So we know that some of these differences are biological, all right? Okay. Now, let's see here. I've been talking for about 12 minutes, so I'm going to go on a little bit more. All right. The next thing I want to kind of, we're going to talk about something a little bit different now, but it's kind of related, and that's sexual orientation. So we've been talking about gender socialization. So now let's talk a little bit about sexual orientation. Okay. One of the things we have seen, it interests me as a sociologist. When I first came to East Central 25 years ago, the attitudes towards people who were gay were a lot more severe, and a lot of people believed that it was a choice, and people rejected them because they thought it was a choice. But what I've noticed is that students at East Central have changed, and now a lot fewer think that it's a choice, and more of them think that it's biological. And it's just, I mean, it's just changed, and I'm not sure why. I mean, more states now have laws protecting the rights of gay folks, and it's, you know, and we're seeing this change. Now, attitudes towards abortion, they haven't changed. They've stayed the same. But in this area, in this social issue, we have seen some change. But what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about gender orientation and sexual orientation, and I want to tell you some theories. Now, I'll tell you up front, I think, and I believe personally, that it is not a choice, that people do not choose that. I think it's biological. And there are several reasons I think that. Some of it's just research I'm going to tell you about, but other is just kind of intuitive face value stuff. I can't see somebody making a choice that alienates you from your family, from your friends, puts you in a totally different social category. I can't see somebody willingly make that choice. And another thing I would just say is I couldn't make that choice. I couldn't start liking guys. I mean, it's in the fabric of my being to like girls. It always has been. Even though I'm an old guy, I still like girls, you know? And it's just, I mean, the thought that I could change is nuts. I ain't going to change. You know, I like girls. So I don't see that. And I will tell you, I think a lot of this stuff about choice, I think it has a religious basis. And I don't want to offend anybody, but I think what's going on is that I think it goes like this. And I could be wrong, and if you think I'm wrong, go ahead and message me and tell me about it. But in the Bible, there are some Bible verses, and I've read one of them, and it says it's a sin for a man to lay with another man. I mean, that's pretty explicit. It's pretty hard to get around that. So it's sinful behavior. Well, if sexual orientation is biological and God created us as biological beings, that means God played a role in creating the sin. And you can't do that. So it's got to be a choice. I think that's the way religious folks deal with that. Now, folks, I don't know how to tell you to deal with that because I don't know. I'm no theologian and I don't know what to think about that. But in my heart and based on some empirical evidence, I think it's biological. And I'm going to go through some research that focuses on the biology of it. And And if you think it's a choice, keep thinking it's a choice, because I don't know. And what you'll see is that a lot of this biological stuff doesn't really support itself. It's not mutually supportive, so I don't know what to think. But let me tell you about this stuff. And, I'm beginning to think I can get this done in one session. Let's see here. Maybe not. Let's see. I've been going almost 20 minutes. Let me tell you about some theories, okay, that tend to support the notion that it's biologically based. And I tell you what, now would be a good time to stop. So here's what this is going to be the end of 13A. I'm going to pause it, stop it. I'm going to start the next section, 13B, and it's going to focus on sexual orientation exclusively. All right, here we go.